So what I'd like to do now, ladies and gentlemen, is to give a criticism of humanism. Humanism is the predominant religion of our age. It's the predominant religion of our society. Our laws are governed by the philosophy of humanism. Bro, can I have more water? Our laws are governed by the philosophy of humanism. Our international agreements and institutions are founded on the basis of humanism. Humanism is the majority religion of the age. Most of your ideas, especially if you're born in the West, are going to be influenced by the philosophy of humanism. And so what I want to do now, and I've lost your umbrella, bro, I'm sorry. What I want to do now is give a Christian critique of humanism. And the document that I'm going to use to give this critique is the Third Humanist Manifesto. So I'm going to quote the document, then I'm going to reply to the document from a Christian perspective. Now, the first particular of the Humanist Manifesto is this: knowledge of the world is derived by observation, experimentation, and rational analysis. Humanists find that science is the best method for determining this knowledge, as well as for solving problems and developing beneficial technologies. We also recognize the value of new departures in thought, the arts, and inner experience, each subject to analysis by critical intelligence. That's what the humanists state. And I want to say as a Christian that I agree with the idea of empiricism. I agree with the idea that we can learn about the world through observation, through experimentation, and through rational analysis. As a Christian, I stand on a heritage that formed the scientific principle. Francis Bacon, for instance. The institutions of the church were some of the chief funders of scientific projects, scientific inquiry. Christians have been the friend of science, we have been the formers of science, and the scientific worldview was born out of a Christian milieu in which natural philosophers said that because God was a rational mind, nature was rational, and therefore nature had rational laws that could be observed. And on this basis, we have the development of the scientific inquiry. Many Christians have been scientists and contributed to rational, scientific, empirical inquiry. So, humanists don't get to claim science as theirs. I'm a Christian. We scientists claim science as something that is as much ours as it is anyone else's. And we also agree that in terms of knowledge about the created world, that indeed scientific inquiry gives us that knowledge, gives us knowledge about the world. However, anyone who is a humanist will recognize that part of the human condition is to engage with and navigate the world through non-material realities. Let me give you some examples. The laws of logic, mathematics, the conscious mind, the idea of meaning, the idea of values, the idea of morals. These are all things that human beings navigate through and work through. And the reality is that humanists accept that these things exist and accept that they are non-material. And so it is not the case that scientific inquiry or empiricism has a complete description of life as it is experienced. And so as a Christian, I offer the critique to the secular humanists that epistemology is based in the idea of narrative, the story. That the story that we tell ourselves is how we understand ourselves, how we understand the world, and how we understand our place in the world. And science, an empirical study, is part of a bigger story, a good part of a bigger story. And that story must account for all the realities that we engage with, not just immaterial cause and effect, not just immaterial sequence. So, if I asked you, what did you do yesterday, you will tell me a story. If I asked you what you're going to do tomorrow, you will tell me a story. Even science creates narratives. Our mind thinks in narratives. And so what we need is the correct narrative to understand ourselves, the world, and our place in it. Now, humans, reading from the Humanist Manifesto, don't mind the wannabe jihadi. He just wants to be a thug, but he's not brave enough to be a thug. So humans, this is what the Humanist Manifesto says. Humans are an integral part of nature, the result of unguided evolutionary change. Humanists recognize nature as self-existing. We accept our life as all and enough, distinguishing things as they are from things as we wish or imagine them to be. We welcome the challenges of the future and are drawn to and undaunted by the yet unknown. So the secular humanists are saying to us that nature is it and there is nothing more. The secular humanists are basing this assertion on the limits of science to inquire into non-material things, non-physical things, things that in philosophy are called metaphysical, like meaning, like value, like the laws of logic, like mathematics and numbers, that don't exist as material realities, but do exist as actual realities and are recognized as being there. So the folly of the statement, this idea that humans are an integral part of nature, the result of unguided evolutionary change, and that nature is self-existing, is a statement that nature alone exists and nothing more. That we can't know nothing more. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I don't believe in the false God of Islam, and the reason why I don't believe in the false God of Islam is because his Quran has been changed, because his prophet was a beast, and because the religion of Islam is a religion that was made by men, not by God, inspired by demons, not by God. But I'm not talking about Islam today. I'm talking about secular humanism, not Muhammad's paedophilia, not his rape, not his caravan robbing, none of those things. I'm talking about Jesus is Lord. Jesus is Lord. You see, we can all come out with our catchphrases. We can come out with our catchphrases. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're just going to wait for the noise to die down a second. Then we're going to try and continue with our presentation. No, let me finish. Let me finish. Let me finish. Let me finish. So, the reality is that secular humanists make a mistake. They make a mistake in saying that this nature is all that we have, whilst accepting that there are non-material realities. Humanists claim that there is such a thing as humanity. They claim that there is such a thing as universal human rights. They claim that there are such a thing as rights. Well, these are not material things. These are immaterial things. The idea of rights is immaterial. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we agree that as Christians we should not fear the unknown. There's nothing for Christians to fear by the unknown. And we don't need to make the claim that we know everything. What we make the claim as Christians to know is we know that which is necessary for salvation. That's what we claim to have proper knowledge of. We don't claim to know everything. You know, it goes on.
I know everything.
It goes on.
God have told me.
So the humanist ethic states this.
You know everything.
The Humanist Manifesto states this.
God told me everything.
Ethical values are derived from human need and interest as tested by experience. Humanist ground values in human welfare shaped by human circumstances, interests and concerns and extended to the global ecosystem and beyond. Now, how many metaphysical claims did you hear in that statement? Remember, the humanists are saying that we can only know the material reality of things because of empiricism. And yet they have spoken about values. They've talked about interests. They've talked about concerns. These are words that derive their substance from another metaphysical statement, the idea of meaning. So in other words, there is a deep-rooted contradiction in the secular manifesto. The secular humanist manifesto contradicts itself. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we Christians agree that we can discern through natural law some of the concerns and interests relevant to how we should live our lives. Why do we believe that you can draw from nature natural laws? Why? Because nature points towards a God that exists. Nature is teleological in its existence. And notice the Muslim says, no, no, no. So he's now an atheist. He doesn't even understand what he's saying. No, ladies and gentlemen. Teleologically, because nature points towards a God, we can derive meaning from that God and the laws he has put in nature. But as Christians, we believe in the authority of revelation. We state that Jesus Christ is a model to us in how we should live. And he has embodied what we call virtues, like love and faith and hope and prudence and chastity and justice, amongst others. And that we should model our lives on him. Christians uphold as the ethical system virtue ethics. Virtue ethics. Not the paradigm of power and power plays that are Muslim ethics, in which even things that are immoral can become moral because they serve the interests of dominance. Christians believe in virtue ethics. We believe in the idea of following a pattern of life built on the habits of life, because that is the most natural ethical system. Humans live by habits. So we should have an ethical system built on the paradigm of man's psychology to be habitual. But that means that man needs an example, and we Christians uphold Jesus Christ as that example to follow. Muslims, by contrast, uphold Muhammad. a man who married and had sex with a child, a man who raped women, a man who allowed his followers to rape women. Choose for yourself who's the better example. No, the Humanist Secular Manifesto goes on to say, life's fulfillment emerges from individual participation in the service of human ideals. Did you hear again? Metaphysical claims that cannot be substantiated empirically. Individualism is a metaphysical claim. It is something that you cannot demonstrate empirically. It is a social construct. Individuals are the constructs of the society that made them. They follow a narrative. They pass through institutions. Those institutions and that narrative that is often pushed upon them through acts like commercialism and advertising, and the narrative of the nation state like the American dream, and values like that are pushed like the American Constitution or the European Bill of Human Rights, influence the decisions that individuals make. As such, the idea that individuals are an autonomous agent are easily disproven. Human beings are subject to the stories that they follow. The idea that you are an individual is a lie. You are born in a family, you live in a community. Nothing about you is your own. Your ideas are not your own. The choices that you have are not your own. They're given to you by your society. Your body was given to you by your family. So how can you claim that you own yourself to commit a euthanasia? How can you claim that you own the child's body to commit murder? And now the heckling stop. I'm going to lower my voice and just talk to the cameras. So this idea of individuality is deeply questionable. Deeply questionable. And whilst we believe that human beings are dignified in their service to other human beings, because that is a Jesus story, that is a Jesus teaching, the idea of humane ideals is something that the humanists have borrowed hook, line and sinker from the Christian church. Why do humanists value love? Why do humanists value the idea of caring for the weak? These are humanist ideals that they have borrowed from Christianity, and it demonstrates that they have been influenced by the Christian narrative. You're borrowing from Christianity. Your ideals are just Christianity light. Nice. And they're not substantiated in any true narrative that's coherent. You go on to state, we aim for our fullest possible development and animate our lives with a deep sense of purpose. Purpose? That's a metaphysical description of reality. Show me in nature where purpose exists, and you will show me evidence of the teleological claims of Christianity. Finding wonder and awe in the joys and beauties of human existence, its challenges and tragedies, and even in the inevitability and finality of death. We Christians are the ones that gave you the scaffold to make that statement, humanists. Humanists rely on the rich heritage of human culture. So you can't argue, because humanism was born out of Christianity, and you've just said that humanists rely on the rich heritage of human culture. And Christianity is the culture in which humanism was born. And the life stance of humanism to provide comfort in times of want and encouragement in times of plenty. Now, this idea of looking after the poor and the weak, you have lifted out of the Judeo-Christian prophets. Your humanism is just Christianity light. These prophets are unknown to Islam. They do not worship Allah. They worship Yahweh alone. Even many of their names contain Yahweh as a part of their name. And yet the Muslims, because Muhammad was an ignorant Bedouin, take the names of Jewish prophets, not understanding that those names contain the name of Yahweh, and they don't even realize it. They just embarrass themselves. Elijah, Yahya contain the names of Yahweh, and yet you can't find Yahweh in the Quran except in the name of the prophets co-opted by the Quran. Let's go on. So,
all this prophet, they are was a Muslim, and
we affirm the values of caring for the weak and the poor and the destitute.
only one God.
But we don't affirm them because they are human values. We affirm them because they are divine values and have divine sanction. Humans are social by nature, the Humanist Manifesto goes on, and find meaning in relationships. Humanists long for and strive toward a world of mutual care and concern, free of cruelty and its consequences, where differences are resolved cooperatively without resorting to violence. That is simply historical bokum. You have made a statement about humanity that is demonstrably not true. What has actually been demonstrably proven by the witness of history is that humans are selfish creatures prone to violence and using forms of violence to get their own way and impose themselves on others, as perfectly exemplified by my wannabe jihadi troll. The reality is that when you look at nature and history, human beings are not creatures that are free of cruelty and its consequences. And they don't necessarily strive to be free of cruelty and its consequences. They only wish to be free of cruelty and its consequences insofar as it affects them and the people that they love. And that's the real description of humanity. That's real humanity. And Christians correct the humanist ethic by recognizing that human nature is sinful. If you describe human nature correctly, you can then begin to approximate the best way for humans to govern ourselves. But we agree with you that humans are social by nature. But if they are social by nature, they're not individuals, as you earlier claimed in your humanist ethic, in your humanist manifesto. Humans can't be both social creatures and individuals. Our individuality is constructed in the matrix of a community, and it is in community that we create our individuality, insofar as it exists at all. It goes on. The joining of individuality with interdependence enriches our lives, encourages to enrich the lives of others, and inspires hope of attaining peace, justice, and opportunity for all. But the reality is our interdependence undermines directly the idea of individuality. I have more knowledge than the Prophet of Islam, who thought that the sun settled in a puddle of mud,
Show me which one.
who thought that human beings could not be born with two hearts,
No, he's born
who
with fitra,
thought
بخلقة.
who
Everyone is born
thought that a
fitra.
binary star
Everyone is born
was a
Muslim.
singular star,
Allah created
who thought the world was flat.
Allah created
I am
all.
smarter than the author of the Quran. I have more knowledge than that author, whoever that author happens to be. Now, we Christians have been longing for and striving for a world of mutual care and concern for 2,000 years. We were doing this before you wrote your manifesto. We were doing this before your entire philosophy was born.
Quran.
The church equals the largest charity in the world. And Christians are responsible for the most charity in the world, even more than the redistributive tax of zakat. Now, ladies and gentlemen, battery, okay. So what we've got is one Muslim harassing a Christian here, and another Muslim harassing a Christian woman over there, another Muslim's applauding it. Ladies and gentlemen, what you are seeing in this park will be what happens to us all if we don't deal with the Islamists. Find your spine, realize your sense of justice, and be willing to stand up to what is evil, ladies and gentlemen. So, continuing with my criticism of secular humanism. See, I'm not even talking about Islam and the Muslims are trolling me. And I'm trying to talk about secular humanism. Now, the Humanist Manifesto continues. Working to benefit society maximizes individual happiness. And I want to stop there and say that you humanists have got it all wrong. The matrix of the family is the foundational block of society. You build society on families, not on individuals. You should organize your laws and your policies around the idea of families, not around the idea of individualism. You should work towards the happiness of families. Because if you work towards the happiness of families, you create the best situation in which everyone is born and raised. Your focus is on the wrong thing. Progressive cultures have worked to free humanity from the brutalities of mere survival and to reduce suffering, improve society, and develop global community. Well, you must be talking about Christendom then, bro. Because it's Christians that created and pulled savage barbarians out of their brutal world and turned them into artists, philosophers, musicians, that created the Sistine Chapel, that created the Pieta, that created the Cathedral of Cologne, that created natural philosophy from which all science emerged. It's Christians that are doing the project that you claim to survive, that you claim progressive cultures have worked to. No, Christians work to that culture. Here's what the progressives have contributed to the West. You contributed to the destruction of the family. You contributed to the denial that women even existed. You took away women's rights. You reintroduced racial apartheid to America with black-only zones. You introduced the idea of murdering our children, ripping them apart limb by limb, leg by leg, arm by arm and crushing their skulls in forceps. Tyranny of reason, in which rationalization subjects all choices to a simple calculus of cost versus benefit. You undermined the value of keeping your word, of keeping your oath. This is what you have actually contributed to civilization, progressives. You contributed to the idea of degenerate art. You want to replace something as beautiful as Leonardo da Vinci's Mona Lisa with the idea of the piss Christ. That's what you want to do. And that you hypocrites would condemn us as intolerant when we draw Muhammad for art's sake, and you say that we're doing something wrong. That's what you've contributed, progressives. You've contributed to the destruction of a civilization that Christians built, ladies and gentlemen. So, it goes on. We seek to minimize the iniquities of circumstances and ability, and we support a just distribution of nature's resources and the fruits of human effort so that as many as possible can enjoy a good life. Notice how the progressive humanist is leaning on the idea of communist economics. We Christians affirm the idea of caring for the poor. However, we also affirm the idea of private ownership, and we believe that these resources should only be redistributed where it is the agreement of society to do so. It cannot be imposed as a principle. And where a society does not make that choice, the church should step up to care for those that the state is not looking after. Ladies and gentlemen, you argue for a belief, an ideal that you assert, but tell me why, without an appeal to a teleological sense of justice, that you can argue for redistribution of resources. Nature does not redistribute resources. Nature argues for survival of the fittest, argues that the strong dominates the weak, argues that the strong takes from the weak what it needs. So you're basing your values not on an observation of nature, you're basing your values on Christian teaching that you have inherited and are now claiming for your own. Ladies and gentlemen, the points of the criticism of the Secular Humanist Manifesto are as follows. It is epistemologically flawed. Human beings understand the world through the narrative, not through empirical science. It describes human society and targets as its loci of focus the wrong thing. It focuses on the individual. We say you should focus on the family. It says that the individual exists when it doesn't understand that the individual is a creation of community. It argues for metaphysics that it can't maintain, and it borrows those metaphysical claims from Christianity while trying to undermine Christianity. This entire argument could be summed up with a single phrase: cogito versus credo. The idea that I think, therefore I am, versus the idea that I believe. We Christians believe that the story you believe in is what forms you and what forms your society, and that is true of the idea of the credo of the Enlightenment. But the Enlightenment argues that through the credo we invent some kind of neutral position by which we can subject the world to a rational discourse about what is true, and that is not a valid argument, because it is not true in itself. Any questions on the topic? Any questions? Go on.
Do you believe that, so you're talking about secular humanism?
Yeah.
Do you believe that's a natural consequence of like the times, or do you believe there's like a satanic agenda pushing to destroy Christianity?
Right, so you're right on both ways. So secular humanism emerged out of a trauma of a Christian civil war. Christians fought one another in the Reformation, killed one another by their millions, and looked for a way to make that war stop. And secular humanism is born, but precisely liberal humanism is born out of the desire to make the Reformation war stop. Humanism, however, predates the Reformation. It emerged out of the Renaissance. Christians are the one that gave the world the study of the humanities. Christians gave the world the idea of the human subject. And the humanists have borrowed that idea and ran with it and politicized it in liberalism. And that is what the devil is using, the lie of liberal secular humanism, to wage war against God and his holy church. Any other questions? Okay.
Give me a comment about what's happened now in this.
So let me address your question, yeah, because that's a question that you've waited to ask. So how do we prove that? It's called the study of history. My statements are not controversial. Go and look up Tom Holland, a historian. He says what I am saying to you. Who's the gay historian that used to appear on Question Time? He now appears on GB News every now and then. He's got his own channel. It's David Starkey. David Starkey is another historian. He says the same thing. It is a settled opinion amongst historians that humanism emerged out of the Christian world in the Renaissance. But it was different at that time to what it is from today. And they do that by looking at historical documents that talk about it. The word humanism, humanities, was first written down by Christians in the Renaissance. When the Renaissance was born, the idea was that Christians wanted us to study other topics other than just theology and philosophy. And so we started studying human behavior. And out of that you emerge the human sciences that many of you now study, like economics, sociology, psychology, and so on. Any other questions, ladies and gentlemen? Questions or comments? Yep, go on, a question. I'm not having a debate, I'm taking a question. What's your question? No, what's your question?
No, wait.
What's your question?
Because,
What's your question?
2 weeks ago, you lied about me.
Okay.
You said you want.
What's your question?
No, let me. You want? I want to know. Question is, show me a video where I lied. You said I promised you £500. I never spoke. Well, whenever I come here,
We have it on video. It's on Soko Films.
Okay.
Everyone.
Okay, bring it.
Maybe JC, when you do the video of this talk, and he interrupts, do the flashback to where we have him on camera promising to give me hundreds of pounds to debate him, that I then debated him and he didn't pay up, which is why I don't debate him now. So ladies and gentlemen, are there any other questions on the topic? Any other questions or comments on the topic, ladies and gentlemen? Don't let the troll hijack this conversation. So the question is about secular humanism and Christianity. I was invited, Lamin. You're lying again. You're lying again, Lamin. You're lying again. Right. So if there are no more questions or comments,
Come here, lie about Islam.
going once,
Gotta have a proper debate.
going once.
Because now expose you. You want me to pay £500?
Ladies and gentlemen, On so-called films, I debate Muslims every week.
No, you can't debate with me.
We have 2 debates with Muslims that were filmed today.
You can't debate.
The reason why I refuse to debate this dishonest man is because he made a verbal contract with me that I have on film and that will appear in so-called films. So watch the videos from this week in which we see the flashback in which he promises to pay for a debate that I delivered on and then he does not pay. Now Muslims, let me ask you this question. Let's see if the Muslims have any integrity. If a man makes an agreement, should he keep his word? Put your hand up. See, the Muslims struggle with a simple ethical question. Let me ask the Christians the same question. So this is to the Christians. If a man makes a promise, Christians, put your hand up if he should keep his word. You see, Christians don't have the ethical problem of Muslims.
You're scared of me.
Muslims that you see in this audience can't affirm that a man should keep his word. Why? I'll explain why. Because Muslims, following the teachings of Islam, don't believe that Christians are worthy of respect and dignity. And so when a Muslim makes his word to a Christian, Muslims don't believe that they are obliged to keep their word. Furthermore, Muslims don't believe that they should tell the truth if by telling the truth they condemn their fellow Muslim, even though their hadiths tell them exactly the opposite. Exactly the opposite. Because they don't practice their deen. Because if Muslims genuinely believe that you should keep your word when you make your word, then they all should have put their hand up when I asked them about whether he should have followed his word. So, ladies and gentlemen, so, ladies and gentlemen, again, I invite you to turn off your camera. Turn off your camera. Turn off your camera. I'm not going to give these guys.
You are scared.
I don't debate him because he can't keep his word. I don't debate him because he's not intelligent enough to debate.